The only reason I'm standing here today is because a 20-cent washer vibrated loose and jammed my rudder pedal. That's it. That is the entire difference between me breathing air and me being a scorch mark on the side of a limestone ridge in Route Pack 6. You want to talk about strategy? You want to talk about the millions of dollars the Air Force spent training me to kill in an F-105 Thunder Chief? Forget it. The universe doesn't care about your flight hours. The universe cares about a loose washer, a glint of sunlight, and the terrifying math of pure, unadulterated luck. Let me take you back to 1967, Tockley Royal Thai Air Force Base. The air was heavy, smelling of burning trash, jet fuel, and wet jungle rot. We were flying Thuds, the F-105. It was a beast of a plane, designed to carry a nuke at low altitude, but we were using it to haul iron bombs over the most heavily defended airspace in the history of warfare, North Vietnam. We called it Going Downtown, Hanoi, Thud Ridge. If you flew 100 missions, you went home. But in '67, the math said you'd get shot down twice before you hit mission 100. I was on mission 44. My call sign was Switch, mostly because I had a habit of nervously flicking the weapon selector switch on the stick when I was taxiing. On this morning, the humidity was so high the canopy was fogging up before I even strapped in. My crew chief, a kid from Iowa named Baker, was looking at the bird with a frown. "She's fighting me today, Major," Baker said, wiping grease off his knuckles. "Rudder feels stiff. I checked the hydraulics, everything is green, but I don't know, it feels gummy." I kicked the pedals. The left one stuck for a microsecond before clunking back. "It's fine, Baker, it's just the heat expanding the lines. I'll fly it." I should have aborted. By every regulation in the book, I should have climbed out, walked to the O Club, and had a beer.
But you don't abort a strike on the tiny Wen rail yards because a pedal feels gummy. We took off, a four-ship formation. I was lead. The Thud is a heavy bird, and when you're fully loaded with 750-pound bombs, she doesn't want to fly. She just wants to roll fast until the Earth curves away. We got airborne, hit the tanker for fuel, and turned north. Everything was routine until we crossed the Red River. That's when the world usually turns into a fireworks factory. We were coming in low and fast, trying to stay under the radar guidance of the SA-2 missiles, the telephone poles. The terrain there is jagged, limestone karsts picking up like rotten teeth from the jungle floor. We were doing 550 knots, weaving through these rock towers. Then, the warning panel lit up. Launch. "Sams, 2 o'clock, break right." My wingman screamed it over the radio. Standard procedure is to wait until the missile is visually acquired, then brake hard into it to ruin its tracking solution. I saw the smoke trail, a white finger of death reaching up from the valley floor. I slammed the stick right and stomped on the right rudder pedal. And nothing happened. The pedal didn't move. That gummy feeling Baker talked about? The washer had finally worked its way into the hinge mechanism. The pedal was locked solid. I couldn't yaw the aircraft. In a high G turn, the rudder is critical for coordinating the bank. Without it, I couldn't snap the nose around fast enough. I was wrestling the stick, screaming into my mask, pulling with both hands, but the nose was sluggish. I was sliding through the air, mushing, instead of turning. Because I couldn't turn tight, I drifted wide. I drifted horribly wide. I missed my turn point by a good 400 yards. And right where I was supposed to be, at the exact apex of the turn I tried to make, the SA-2 detonated. It was a proximity fuse.
If I had made the turn correctly, if that washer hadn't jammed, I would have flown directly into the expanding sphere of shrapnel. Instead, I was 400 yards out of position, struggling with a broken plane. The shock wave hit me, rattled my teeth, popped the circuit breakers, but the shrapnel missed. I was alive because my plane failed. But the ride wasn't over. Now I was separated from my flight, heavy with bombs, with a jammed rudder, deep in enemy territory. I had to jettison the ordnance. I hit the pickle button to drop the bomb safe, just to get the weight off so I could maneuver. The racks clunked. The plane jumped up, lighter. I turned back south, trying to limp home. I was alone. The silence in the cockpit was heavy. The radar warning receiver was chirping, looking for more Sams. Then I heard it, not on the radio, in my head. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't God. It wasn't my mother. It was a smell. Suddenly, My cockpit smelled like burning pipe tobacco, specifically cherry Cavendish. My grandfather smoked cherry Cavendish. He had been dead for 10 years. The oxygen mask is a sealed system. I'm breathing processed air. There was no way, physically, for an external smell to get in there, and certainly not the specific brand of tobacco my grandfather smoked in a rocking chair in Ohio. The smell was overwhelming. It made my eyes water. And with that smell came an intense, paralyzing urge to pull up. Tactically, pulling up is suicide. You stay low to use the terrain as a shield. If you go high, the fire can radars lock you up, and the 85mm flak tears you apart. Every instinct I had as a pilot screamed, "Stay low." But the smell was choking me. It was so strong I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was a physical compulsion. I yanked back on the stick, lighting the afterburner, rocketing straight up into the blue. 2 seconds later, the jungle floor where I had just been flying erupted.
It wasn't flak. It was a Zippo trap. The NVA had set up a wall of heavy machine guns, 12.7mm and 37mm, camouflaged in the tree line, aimed horizontally across the valley floor. They knew we flew low. They didn't need radar. They just waited for the sound of a jet and filled the valley with lead. If I had stayed on the deck, I would have flown into a literal wall of bullets. By pulling up, I flew right over the top of the tracers. I looked down and saw the green, glowing balls of fire passing harmlessly beneath my tailpipe. I was at 10,000 feet now, panting, the smell of tobacco fading as quickly as it arrived. I was alive. Again. But the universe has a sense of humor, and it's usually a dark one. I was high now, which meant I was visible. A MiG-21, sleek and silver, dropped out of the sun at 6 o'clock high. He had me cold. I didn't see him. My radar warning didn't pick him up because he wasn't using radar. He was using heat-seeking missiles. He fired an ATOL missile. I didn't know it was coming. I was flying straight and level, trying to figure out why my rudder was working again. The vibration of the afterburner must have dislodged the washer. The missile tracked my tailpipe. It was closing at Mach 2. It was 3 seconds from impact. At that exact moment, the master caution light flashed. Generator failure. When the main generator kicks off in an F-105, the electrical load transfers. The lights flicker, the instrument panel goes crazy for a second. But on this specific aircraft, on this specific day, the electrical surge caused the stick shaker, the stall warning system, to short circuit. The stick shaker is a motor that vibrates the control stick violently to warn you that you're about to fall out of the sky. It shorted out and engaged. My hand was on the stick. The motor went off, vibrating uncontrollably. It startled me so bad that my arm jerked reflexively. I snatched the stick hard to the left, rolling the plane inverted.
It was an involuntary twitch, a mistake. The ATOL missile, which lacks the advanced guidance of modern weapons, couldn't handle the sudden, violent change in aspect. It tried to correct, over-G'd, and tumbled past my canopy, missing me by maybe 50 feet. I saw the smoke trail corkscrew past my head. I had just dodged a heat-seeking missile because of a short circuit. By now, I was done. My nerves were shot. I dove back down, hit the afterburner, and ran for the border. I crossed into Laos, then into Thailand. I saw the Takli runway shimmering in the heat. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I lined up for the approach. Landing a thud is like landing a brick with tiny wings. You come in fast, 180 knots. I dropped the gear. 3 green lights. I dropped the flaps. I touched down. Smoke from the tires. I pulled the drag chute handle. The chute blossomed behind me, slowing the plane down. I stood on the brakes. I was taxiing off the active runway, shaking, soaked in sweat, ready to kiss the ground. I taxied into my revetment. Baker ran out, chocks in hand. I shut down the engine. The whine of the turbine spooled down into silence. I opened the canopy and took off my helmet. The air was hot and sticky. Baker climbed up the ladder. He looked pale. He was staring at the side of the fuselage, right behind the intake. "Major," he said, his voice trembling, "you need to see this." I climbed down. My legs felt like jelly. I walked around to where he was pointing. Embedded in the fuselage, right where the main fuel line runs to the engine, was a piece of shrapnel. It was jagged, nasty, rusted iron. It must have come from the SA-2 blast,
the one I dodged because of the jammed rudder. It had punched through the skin of the aircraft. It had severed the hydraulic line to the rudder, which explained why it felt weird earlier. But then it had hit the fuel line. It had cut the fuel line halfway through.
Fuel was weeping out of the cut, dripping onto the hot engine casing. "Why didn't it ignite?" Baker whispered. JP4 fuel is highly flammable. If it hits hot metal, whoosh. I had been flying with a fuel leak onto a hot engine for 45 minutes. I had used the afterburner. I had pulled high Gs. I looked closer at the cut. Wedged into the gash in the fuel line, effectively plugging the hole like a stopper in a bathtub, was a small, flattened piece of metal. It wasn't part of the shrapnel. It was foreign object debris. I pulled it out with my fingernails. A spray of fuel hit me in the face, stinging my eyes. I wiped my eyes and looked at the piece of metal in my palm. It was the washer. The same 20-cent washer that had jammed my rudder pedal. When I slammed the pedal during the missile break, the force must have sheared the washer, sent it flying into the fuselage cavity, where it rattled around until the explosion. The shrapnel hit the line, and by some chaotic 1 in a billion physics, the washer had been sucked into the vacuum of the leak and sealed it. The thing that almost killed me at the start of the flight was the only thing that kept me from exploding at the end of it. I stood there on the tarmac, smelling the fuel, the heat, and the faint, lingering scent of cherry Cavendish that seemed to drift from the cockpit. I didn't fly for a week after that. I just sat in the O Club, staring at that washer. I still have it. It's on my keychain. People talk about skill. They talk about the right stuff. And sure, you need to know how to fly. You need to know your energy management and your tactics. But don't let anyone tell you that war is a science. War is a chaotic mess of moving parts. Sometimes the machine gun jams and saves the enemy. Sometimes the bomb doesn't go off. And sometimes a 20-cent piece of hardware decides that today is not your day to die. Again. I never smelled the tobacco again. But every time I climb into a cockpit, I check the rudder pedals twice. And then I check them again. Because out there, above the clouds, the margin between a hero and a casualty isn't measured in seconds or inches. It's measured in luck. And luck is a mechanic you can't fire, you can't train, and you sure as hell can't trust. You just have to ride it until the wheels touch the ground.